Tonight, I will tell you a story about fear, courage, and the power of a single voice. It is a story about a woman named Elena. But on this rainy Tuesday evening, Elena's voice was nowhere to be found. In the air of her quiet office, something felt heavy, like a storm that was waiting to break. The city of Chicago was loud. Outside the tall glass windows, trains rumbled and taxis honked. The city had a rhythm, a noisy, chaotic song. But inside the office on the 40th floor, it was perfectly silent. Elena sat at her desk, staring at a calendar on the wall. She held a red marker in her hand. Her hand was shaking just a little bit. Elena was a brilliant architect. When she drew a building, the lines were strong and confident. She could design towers that touched the clouds and museums that made people cry with joy. But Elena had a secret. In her mind, she was eloquent and smart. But in the real world, in this new country, she felt invisible. She watched her American colleagues in the break room. They were laughing. They told jokes effortlessly. Their English flowed like water, fast, clear, and natural. Elena wanted to join them. She wanted to stand up, walk into the room, and say, "The weather is terrible, isn't it?" But she did not move. She stayed in her chair, hidden behind her computer screen. The knot in her throat was too tight. She looked back at the calendar. She drew a thick red circle around the date, November 14th. Just 1 hour ago, her boss had stood at her desk. He had looked at her with serious eyes. "Elena," he had said, "this is the biggest project of the year. The board of directors wants to hear from you. You have to present the design. You have exactly 21 days. 21 days. Elena looked at the red circle. The ink was still wet. She felt a cold wave of panic in her stomach. She did not know that this date would force her to break her silence. She only knew that 21 days was not enough time to change a lifetime of fear. The next morning began with a battle. It was a silent battle between Elena and her bathroom mirror. The apartment was quiet. Elena stood in front of the glass, brushing her hair. She looked at her reflection and took a deep breath. She needed to practice. "Good morning," she said to the mirror. "My name is Elena. I am an architect." She frowned. Her voice sounded stiff. It sounded robotic, like a machine trying to be a human. In her head, her thoughts were colorful and fast. She could think in complex sentences. She could argue about art and history in her mind. But when she opened her mouth, the bridge between her brain and her tongue collapsed. She tried again. She opened a thick grammar book on the counter. She had highlighted hundreds of words. "I am delighted to present this structure," she recited. "It is a magnificent design." She sighed. It felt fake. It felt like she was wearing clothes that did not fit. An hour later, Elena decided to leave her apartment. She needed coffee, and she needed to feel like a real person. She walked down the busy street to the Bean Hive, her favorite coffee shop. It was crowded and noisy. The smell of roasted beans and sweet milk filled the air. Elena stood in line. Her heart started to beat faster. Thump, thump, thump. She rehearsed her order in her head. Small cappuccino. Small cappuccino. Small cappuccino. It was simple. She could do this. She stepped up to the counter. The barista was a young man with bright blue glasses. He smiled at her. Hey there. What can I get started for you? Small cappuccino. Please. Elena said softly. She did it. She felt a tiny spark of victory. But then, the barista leaned forward. We actually have a special today, a pumpkin spice latte with oat milk. It's super good. You want to try that instead? Elena froze. The question was unexpected. Her brain stopped working. She understood the words, but she could not find the answer fast enough. The line of people behind her felt heavy. The barista was waiting. The silence stretched out, long and awkward. I know, she stammered. Her face felt hot. Just coffee. Please. She grabbed her cup and walked away quickly, not looking back. Her hands were shaking again. She felt foolish. It was such a small moment, a tiny interaction, but it made her feel powerless. She could design a 40-story building, but she could not handle a simple question about milk. She walked back to her apartment building, her head down, looking at her shoes. She felt completely alone in her struggle. But as she unlocked her door, she did not notice a shadow in the hallway. She did not know that her quiet struggle had been watched by the grumpy old man who lived across the hall. And this quiet discomfort was about to become something much louder. That evening, the hallway of Elena's apartment building was dimly lit. The air smelled faintly of old wood and dust. Elena was walking toward the trash chute, holding a crumpled piece of paper. She was muttering to herself, reciting the opening line of her presentation. The building is designed to maximize natural light and efficiency. She said it again. Maximize natural light and efficiency. Suddenly, a door swung open behind her. A deep, booming voice filled the narrow hallway. Boring. Absolutely terrible. Elena jumped. She spun around, her heart pounding. Standing in the doorway of apartment 4B was an elderly man. He was tall and thin, wearing a velvet dressing gown that looked very old and very expensive. He had wild white hair and eyes that were sharp and blue. This was Mr. Arthur. Elena knew he was a retired actor, but they had never spoken. Excuse me? Elena whispered. Mr. Arthur stepped into the hallway. He pointed a long finger at her. I could hear you through the wall. You sound like an instruction manual for a dishwasher. You sound like a robot that is running out of batteries. Elena felt a flush of heat rise to her cheeks. She was offended. She had worked hard on that sentence. I am practicing for a serious presentation, she said stiffly. It must be perfect. Perfect? Mister, Arthur laughed. It was a loud, theatrical laugh. My dear, it is perfectly boring. You are speaking English. Yes. The grammar is correct. The vocabulary is fancy. But you are not saying anything. Where's the blood? Where's the life? He shook his head and closed his door with a dramatic thud. Elena stood alone in the silence. She felt angry. What does he know? She thought. He is just a crazy old man. I am a professional. She went back to her apartment and made a choice. A bad choice. She decided that she needed to study harder. If her speech sounded robotic, it was because she didn't know enough majestic words. She needed more adjectives. She needed more complex grammar structures. For the next 3 nights, Elena did not sleep. She surrounded herself with thick dictionaries and thesauruses. She rewrote her speech 5 times. She added words like architectural integrity and unprecedented aesthetic value. She forced herself to memorize every syllable. She wrote the speech on sticky notes and pasted them on her walls, on her fridge, even on her bathroom mirror. If I memorize everything, she told herself, I will be safe. I cannot make a mistake if I am reading a script. By day 7, she was exhausted. Her eyes were red and dry. She stood in the center of her living room and read her new speech out loud. The English was advanced. The sentences were long and impressive. But deep down, a small voice in her heart whispered the truth. She didn't sound like a leader. She sounded like she was hiding behind a wall of words. She looked at the pile of papers on her desk. She thought she still had time to fix things with a pen and paper. She thought that if she just wrote a better script, the fear would go away. She was wrong. It was the night of day 7. The rain was hitting the window hard, sounding like 1,000 tiny fingers tapping against the glass. Elena sat on the floor of her apartment. Around her, there was a sea of white paper. She had crumpled up her first draft, her second draft, and her third draft. The trash can was full. She picked up the latest version of her speech. She read the first sentence out loud. The structural integrity of this edifice is paramount to the urban landscape. She stopped. She closed her eyes. It was perfect English, but it was dead. It had no heartbeat. If she spoke like this in the boardroom, they would not trust her. They would see a frightened woman hiding behind big words. For the first time since moving to America, Elena considered giving up. She looked at her phone. She could call her mother. She could say, I tried, but I am not strong enough. I am coming home. The thought was sweet and easy. It was safe. But then, she remembered the calendar. 14 days left. She stood up. She did not grab her phone. Instead, she walked to her front door. She opened it and crossed the hallway. She stood in front of apartment 4B. She raised her hand to knock, but she stopped. Her hand hovered in the air. This was a crazy idea. Mister, Arthur was rude. He was loud. He was not a teacher. But he told you the truth. A voice in her head whispered. He is the only one who told you the truth. She knocked. 3 hard, sharp raps. A moment later, the door creaked open. Mister, Arthur stood there, holding a cup of steaming tea. He looked at her with his sharp blue eyes. He did not smile. The robot returns. He said dryly, "Have you come to recite the dictionary to me?" "No," Elena said. Her voice was quiet but steady. "You were right. I sound like a textbook. I don't want to be perfect anymore. I want to be heard." Mister, Arthur looked at her. He took a sip of his tea. The silence stretched between them. But this time, Elena did not look down. She looked right at him. "I have a presentation in 2 weeks," she said. "If I fail, I lose everything. Please, help me." Mister, Arthur sighed. He opened the door wider. "Listen to me carefully. Young woman, I am not an English teacher. I do not care about your grammar books. If you work with me, we do things my way. No scripts, no memorizing, no hiding." He leaned forward, his face serious. "It will be uncomfortable. It will be ridiculous. You might hate me." "I don't care," Elena said. "I am ready." "Good. Mister," Arthur said. He stepped back and gestured for her to come inside. Elena took a breath. She stepped over the threshold and into his apartment. The air smelled of old paper and peppermint tea. As the door clicked shut behind her, she knew she had made a choice. She had thrown away her safety net. By the time the sun went down that night, nothing in her life would be the same. For the next 10 days, Elena did not look at a single grammar book. In fact, she did not look at a building or a blueprint either. Her life became a series of strange, exhausting, and ridiculous challenges. Mister, Arthur was a relentless teacher. He did not care about subject-verb agreement. He cared about breath. "Your voice is stuck in your throat," he shouted on day 8. They were standing in his living room. "You are trying to be polite. Stop being polite. Be loud. I want you to feel the sound vibrate in your toes." He made her lie on the floor with heavy books on her stomach. He made her shout the alphabet until her lungs burned. He made her sing her favorite song while standing on one leg. "If you are thinking about your balance," Arthur explained, "you cannot worry about your accent." On day 12, the training moved outside. This was Elena's nightmare. Arthur took her to a busy park in the center of the city. He handed her a book of children's poems. "Read," he commanded, "and make sure the pigeons can hear you." Elena looked around. People were walking dogs. A couple was eating sandwiches on a nearby bench. "I can't," she whispered. "Everyone will look at me. They will think I am crazy." "Let them look." Arthur roared happily. "You are an architect. Elena, you build skyscrapers. Why are you afraid of few eyes? Read." Elena's face burned with shame. She opened the book. She started to read a poem about a purple cow. At first, her voice was a mouse's squeak. But Arthur shook his head. He tapped his ear. Louder. She took a deep breath. She closed her eyes. She imagined she was shouting across a construction site. "I never saw a purple cow." She yelled. A man walking a poodle stopped and stared. A teenager on a skateboard laughed. Elena opened her eyes. She waited for the ground to swallow her. But the world did not end. The sun was still shining. The teenager rolled away. The man with the poodle just shrugged and kept walking. Suddenly, a strange feeling bubbled up in Elena's chest. It wasn't fear. It was laughter. She started to laugh. She stood in the middle of the park, holding a children's book, laughing until her stomach hurt. She realized that making a mistake didn't kill her. Being loud didn't hurt her. By day 18, the change was visible. Elena walked differently. She didn't look at her shoes anymore. When she bought her coffee, she looked the barista in the eye. She didn't use perfect grammar, but she spoke with a rhythm that was all her own. On the last evening before the presentation, Arthur poured them both a cup of tea. The apartment was quiet. "You are ready," he said softly. Elena nodded. She felt a quiet strength in her bones. She wasn't the perfect English speaker, but she was no longer the invisible woman. "Thank you," she said. I think I can do this." She went back to her own apartment to sleep. She felt ready. She felt prepared. But as she closed her eyes, she did not know that the universe had one final trick to play. She felt ready for the speech. But the real test was something she could not practice for. Day 21 arrived with a cold, gray sky. Elena walked into the conference room on the top floor. The room was huge. A long glass table stretched across the center, and around it sat 12 serious people in expensive suits. These were the directors. They held pens and notepads. They did not smile. Elena's boss, Mr. Henderson, was pacing near the window. He looked nervous. "Okay, Elena," he whispered. "The projector is set up. The slides are ready. Just stick to the script. Don't improvise." Elena nodded. She felt the old fear trying to climb up her throat, but she pushed it down. She had her laptop. She had her beautiful 3D images. She had her safety net. She stood at the front of the room. "Good morning," she said. Her voice was steady. "So far, so good. She pressed a button to start the presentation. The projector hummed. A beam of blue light hit the screen. This design, Elena began, is inspired by the history of our city. She pressed a button for the next slide. Nothing happened. She pressed it again. Suddenly, with a loud pop, the projector light flickered and died. The screen went black. The hum of the machine stopped. Silence filled the room. It was a heavy, suffocating silence. What happened? One of the directors asked. Technical malfunction. Mr. Henderson muttered, rushing over to hit the machine. Give us a minute. Elena stood alone in the dark. Her hands started to sweat. Her slides were gone. Her script was useless without the images. She felt the panic rising like a flood. I can't do this, she thought. I need my pictures. I need my words. She looked at the directors. They were checking their watches. They looked bored. They looked ready to leave. She looked at her boss. He was sweating. Then she remembered the park. She remembered the purple cow. She remembered Mr. Arthur's voice. If you are thinking about your balance, you cannot worry about your accent. Stop hiding. Elena closed her eyes for 1 second. She took a deep breath. She let the air fill her chest. I don't need the machine, she thought. I built this building in my mind. She walked away from the podium. She walked away from the dark screen. She moved toward the table, standing just a few feet away from the head director. Forget the screen, Elena said. Her voice was not loud, but it was clear. It cut through the room like a bell. Mr. Henderson looked up, shocked. Elena, wait, the machine is broken. Elena continued, looking directly into the director's eyes. But the idea is not. She closed her laptop with a sharp snap. Imagine, she said, raising her hand. Imagine a wall made entirely of glass, facing the morning sun. When you stand there, you do not feel like you are in an office. You feel like you are floating above the streets. She didn't use big words like edifice or paramount. She used simple, strong words. She described the light. She described the feeling of the space. She painted the building in the air with her hands. She saw the director stop, checking his watch. She saw him lean forward. She saw the boredom vanish from his face. For 10 minutes, Elena did not speak perfect English. She made a few grammar mistakes. She forgot an article here and there. But she spoke with fire. She spoke with the rhythm of a storyteller. She was reciting a script. She was sharing a dream. When she finished, she stood still. Her heart was pounding against her ribs, but her hands were steady. The room was quiet again. But this time, it wasn't the silence of awkwardness. It was the silence of people who were listening. The silence in the boardroom lasted for 5 long seconds. Elena held her breath. She watched the head director's face. He was an old man with a serious expression, but slowly, the corners of his mouth turned up. He smiled. I have seen 100 presentations this year, the director said, his voice warm. Usually, I look at graphs and numbers. But today, for the first time, I saw a building. He stood up and clapped his hands. Then, the other directors stood up. The room erupted into applause. It wasn't polite, quiet clapping. It was loud and genuine. Mr. Henderson, her boss, let out a long sigh of relief and gave Elena a thumbs up. They didn't care about the broken projector. They didn't care about the missing articles or the small grammar mistakes. They had understood her. An hour later, Elena walked out of the office building. The rain had stopped. The city of Chicago looked different now. The noise of the traffic didn't feel chaotic. It felt like a celebration. She had the contract. She had the project. But she didn't call her mother first. She ran straight home. She ran up the stairs to the fourth floor and pounded on the door of apartment 4B. Mr. Arthur. Mr. Arthur. The door opened. The old man stood there in his velvet robe, looking grumpy as usual. Stop shouting, he grumbled. You are disturbing the dust. Elena laughed. She couldn't help it. She hugged him. Mr. Arthur stiffened, surprised, but then he awkwardly patted her back. I did it, Elena said, pulling away. I spoke. I was loud. I didn't use the script. They loved it. Of course they did, Arthur said, walking back into his kitchen to put the kettle on. You finally stop hiding. Elena followed him. She looked at the old posters on his wall. You are a wonderful teacher, she said. And you must have been a magnificent actor. I wish I could have seen you on stage. Did you play Shakespeare? Mister. Arthur stopped. He turned around slowly. The steam from the kettle rose between them. His sharp blue eyes looked soft for the first time. Elena, he said quietly, I have a confession. He pulled a chair out and sat down. I was never an actor. Elena blinked. What? But your voice, the poetry, the drama. Mister. Arthur smiled a sad, small smile. I was an accountant. And for the first 40 years of my life, I had a severe stutter. I could barely say my own name. I was terrified of the telephone. I was terrified of people. Elena stared at him, shocked. The man with the booming voice? The man who shouted in hallways? I spent half my life in silence. Just like you, Arthur continued. Then, when I was 50, I met a teacher. She taught me to breathe. She taught me to shout. She taught me that if I stopped trying to be perfect, I could finally be free. The exercises I taught you, those were not acting lessons. Those were the things that saved my life. Elena looked at him with new eyes. She realized that his loudness wasn't arrogance. It was a victory. Every time he spoke, he was winning a battle against his own fear. She sat down across from him. She didn't feel like a student anymore. She felt like a friend. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me," Arthur said, pouring 2 cups of tea. "You did the work. Now, drink your tea. You have a skyscraper to build." Let's look at Elena's journey one more time, from the beginning to the end. There was a woman named Elena who lived in a loud city. She was a brilliant architect who could design beautiful buildings. However, she had a big problem. She was terrified of speaking English. She understood everything, but when she tried to speak, she felt invisible. She wanted to be perfect, and this desire for perfection made her silent. One day, her boss gave her a challenge. She had to present her design to the directors in exactly 21 days. If she failed, she would lose her job. At first, Elena tried to solve this problem with books. She memorized long words. She wrote a script that was full of complex grammar. She thought that if she used fancy language, she would sound confident. But she was wrong. She sounded like a robot. Then she met her neighbor, Mr. Arthur. He was an old man with a loud voice and a strange personality. Elena asked him for help. Arthur threw away her grammar books. He told her that she did not need more words. She needed more courage. For 2 weeks, they practiced in strange ways. Arthur made Elena shout in the hallway. He made her read children's poems in a busy park. He taught her to stop apologizing for her mistakes. Slowly, Elena learned to relax. She learned that it was okay to be imperfect. Finally, the big day arrived. Elena stood in front of the important directors. She was ready to read her script. But suddenly, the technology failed. The projector broke, and the screen went black. Elena's safety net was gone. In that moment of panic, Elena remembered Arthur's lesson. She closed her computer. She looked at the people, not the machine. She described her building with simple, passionate words. She spoke from her heart. The directors loved her speech because they could feel her emotion. She won the project. But she learned something even more important when she went home. Mr. Arthur told her his secret. He was not a famous actor. He was a retired accountant who used to stutter. He had learned to speak loudly to save himself, just like he saved Elena. They both learned the same lesson. You do not need to be perfect to be heard. You just need to be brave. My name is Elena, and for a long time, I was a shadow. I lived in Chicago, a city full of noise and energy, but my own life was completely silent. I want to tell you how it felt to be afraid of my own voice. It is a heavy feeling. Every time I tried to speak English, my throat felt tight, like there was a knot in it. I thought that everyone was judging me. I thought that one grammar mistake would ruin my career. When my boss gave me the deadline, 21 days, I was terrified. I remember sitting on my floor, surrounded by dictionaries. I tried to hide behind books. I spent nights memorizing big, complicated words because I believed that complex meant intelligent. I didn't want to connect with people. I wanted to impress them. I wanted to build a wall of beautiful words so no one could see how scared I was. Then I met Arthur. To be honest, at first, I thought he was crazy. When he made me stand in the park and shout at the pigeons, I wanted to die of embarrassment. I felt ridiculous. But then, something changed inside me. As I shouted, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I felt free. For the first time, I wasn't checking my grammar in my head before I spoke. I was just letting the sound out. I realized that my voice didn't have to be perfect. It just had to be mine. The scariest moment of my life was in that boardroom when the screen went black. My hands were sweating. My heart was beating like a loud drum against my ribs. In that second, I wanted to run away. I really wanted to quit. But then, I heard Arthur's voice in my memory. Stop hiding. I took a deep breath. I decided to trust myself. When I spoke without the script, I didn't feel like a robot anymore. I looked at the directors, and I saw them looking back at me. It was a powerful feeling. I wasn't just an architect showing a drawing. I was a human being sharing a dream. Now, when I order coffee, I don't rehearse the sentence 10 times. I just speak. I still make mistakes. Sometimes I forget a word. But I am no longer a shadow. I am Elena, and I have a voice. And so, the seasons changed in Chicago. Winter turned into spring, and the cold rain turned into warm sunlight. Today, if you visit the center of the city, you will see a beautiful new building. It is 40 stories high, made of glass that reflects the clouds. It is light, open, and confident. People stop on the sidewalk to look up at it and admire its design. Elena built that tower. But the strongest thing Elena built that year was not made of steel or glass. It was made of courage. Many of us are like Elena. We have rich, beautiful thoughts inside our heads, but we keep them locked behind a door of silence. We wait until our grammar is perfect. We wait until we know every word in the dictionary. We think that if we make a mistake, we have failed. But Elena and Mr. Arthur taught us something different. They taught us that a mistake is not a failure. It is just proof that you are trying. Fluency is not about knowing every word. It is about having the courage to share who you are. Thank you for listening to the story. I hope it helps you find your own voice, even if it shakes a little bit. If you enjoyed this time with me, please click the like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps me share more stories with learners like you around the world. And I have a question for you. What is one situation where you feel nervous to speak English? Tell me in the comments below. I would love to read your story. You can also listen to this video again tomorrow. Try to speak along with me. And remember, do not worry about being perfect. Just be loud. Good night and happy learning.